So I shared this article that came out in the last couple of days on my Facebook page to do with Disney's long-standing rule about not wanting to depict in their feature film releases in any way, shape, or form the smoking or consumption of tobacco products on screen, and how this article is basically making a little bit of a hullabaloo that this would now carry over into the Marvel Studios framework under the Disney banner. You know, Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, all these movies, there would be no smoking allowed in those films to be depicted and such like that. And I shared the article, being that I am somebody who considers myself to be a somewhat laid-back straight edge. That is to say, I've made the personal choices for myself not to partake or have anything to do with smoking, tobacco products, alcohol, drinking, narcotics, drugs, all that kind of stuff. As well as I'm not somebody who is militant. I don't get up in people's faces and tell them the way they should be doing things, that they shouldn't have the freedoms to choose and all that kind of stuff. I'm very much about the individual's right to freedom and their own choice and everything like that. I was somewhat taken aback with all that said, people's knee-jerk reactionary just incredulousness at the fact that Disney is passing this down. I had people who were really getting upset, like, this is bullshit, this is utter malarkey, this should not be happening, it's a slight against freedom, and all these different things, getting so uptight about it and treating it like it's the end of their own personal freedom of choice and all this kind of stuff. And it was just mind-boggling to me, because when I shared the article, I made the point of saying that, for me personally, I'm happy with this. I'm happy that I can actually go to movies where I don't have to see this shit. I prefer to not have this stuff in my life. I don't surround myself with people who do partake in alcohol and smoking, frequently and all that kind of stuff, because frankly, it's nasty, it stinks, and I don't want my own health put at risk more than it already is with the health issues I have, with the health issues my sister has. And, I made the effect of pointing out our parents, our grandparents, all of our grandparents, a majority of our family have died, from health issues related to or aided by, assisted by smoking and continually smoking. Even, my parents had both quit various times, and they ended up going back to it because of the addiction and the need. And but they would always stringently be there and say, don't make the mistake we did. Don't start this. Don't ever pick this up, and that kind of thing. And there's something to be said for, I believe personally, something like smoking being something that people will pick up from entertainment properties, not in the same way as the government will turn around and say, well, if people are getting beaten up in films and people are shooting guns and you're seeing murders and all this kind of stuff, I don't think those things influence people in the same way that something like smoking can influence people, because in society we have two very drastically, extremely different ways of handling both of those things. Murder, killing, taking lives, owning a gun. I mean, there are laws, and from a very early age, not only instinctually, something genetically born within us, but we're taught these things are wrong. These are laws against which you do not want to break, or you will suffer the consequences. You don't harm others, you don't take lives. Granted, there are people in society who are that mentally fucked that they don't care and they'll still do those things. They get off on those things. Their brains aren't wired correctly, whatever it is. But I think when you look at tobacco consumption, this is something going back to the earliest days of television. You had cartoon characters like Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble telling you how great a pack of Camels was and stuff like that. It's become a sort of specious rite of passage to adulthood for people to think, well, I'm a grown-up when I can go get my beer and I can go get my smokes and that kind of thing. And I think there's a level of people being reactionary to the fact that Disney is passing down this rule of not depicting it, because they're having taken away from them sort of an excuse that they can fall back on, something that can make them feel a little less guilty for having that addiction and excusing it. I had somebody make the case, that whole case about the guns and violence versus smoking, and I had somebody else talking about, how it probably wasn't as influential as, say, the environment somebody grows up in and their parentage and everything like that. And I agree with that to a large point. As I say, calling back on my own parents, they were very adamant. Don't pick up this vice. Don't ever get associated with it. You will regret it. I regret it, and all these things. The health problems we saw firsthand as they whittled away and died, the effect negatively that it had on them and everything like that. And for me, I do agree that there are things in Hollywood that we know are fake. There are things that from the get-go, from our birth, society teaches us are wrong and are bad. And we don't see things like consuming tobacco products shown in that kind of a light because of the commercialism, because of that passive sort of, again, to use the term, specious rite of passage in thinking, this is what makes me an adult. This is how I know I've grown up and all this kind of stuff. And that isn't to say that there are people out there who are just, completely mind-fucked and they don't care and, they want to pass smoking on to others because they hope they get hurt and all this kind of stuff. I don't think there's anything along those lines. For me personally, I think it's more so about the fact that people get caught up in it, and whether they know it's bad or not, the example they lead depends on their own surroundings and how much they care about themselves, how much they care about those around them. And I think there is a level of people who are going to be taken aback by this and reacting because they are smokers and they want to feel like what they're doing is not necessarily as bad as it is, somewhat a level of denial. There are also people who will, I think, very wrongfully react to this as though it is some sort of slight against their personal choice or their right to, see movies depicting this stuff. You have a series like Mad Men where they are smoking and drinking in every other freaking scene. I mean, I don't think there's ever not a cigarette lit in any scene of that show. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the point being, people watch that, and as one of the people who responded to my sharing of this article made a point of saying, they feel like they have somebody they can connect to, they can relate with, because it's a vice that they share with the character. And I feel, as I told this person, that this is a very lazy, cop-out way of showing and depicting human beings dealing with their problems. Oh, well, I'm just not going to face it. I'm going to get shit-faced. I'm going to smoke my cigs, make myself feel better because of the chemical reaction in my brain and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's really just a piss-poor way of depicting things. Something I wanted to counter to the person, but of course, by that point in the conversation, they said, well, we'll have to agree to disagree on this topic. But the fact of the matter is, what is the next step as far as why are you advocating people should be smoking and they should depict this stuff, and it's unfair that they would go against depicting this stuff in films if it's not going to affect what you do and the choices you make, because somebody else pointed out that they have never touched a cigarette in their life, and things they have watched all throughout their lives has depicted people smoking, characters, smoking up and this, that, and the other thing, chain smoking otherwise, and the advertisements and everything. And they made the point of saying, it's more about the environment you grow up in. It's more about your parentage. And as I said, I think that's largely true to a degree. But then I also had to counter with the fact that, well, if it's not going to influence you one way or the other to go and pick up a pack of cigarettes, then how is there anything lost in translation if they take that out? If you're not going to be affected by it anyway, why are you upset that they're taking it out? It didn't affect you in the first place, so it shouldn't affect you that it's not there. It wasn't there to you in the first place. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And it just boggles my mind that people would be so upset about this, because I think the reaction, the thought process is that, this is some kind of form of censorship. It's not in any way, shape, or form the same as another article that I had, posted and really had a good rant about, where people were creating an app to take out sort of curse words, shit, fuck, piss, all these words out of books where they were well established in, to make the reading experience, through the form of censorship, less offensive to readers and such like that, who wanted to read those things but not have to experience those words. One is freedom of expression and creativity, and it's sacrilege to go against and, force censorship on a person's words, an artist's words, and everything like that. The other is a completely unnecessary human vice that is entirely unhealthy and lethal and all these kinds of things, that is very passively dealt with in as far as laws and society and the way we look at it and everything like that. It's two completely different ball games as far as I'm concerned. It's like trying to compare baseball and football, and I'm not even a sports fan. You know what I'm saying? For me personally, I don't see why people should get so reactionary over this unless they feel like they are personally losing something in the gatefold. That is to say, people who are smokers and who, like that person commented, have some sort of ill-gotten connection or familiarity with characters who share in the same kind of vices they do. And again, I want to point out, I'm not supporting the idea of forcibly making movie studios and all these things, censor this kind of activity in their works. I'm talking about supporting a film studio who has made a decision for their own products to not put that forth. It would be like one of these people telling me, Johnny Blues, you are a writer and you're writing a story, but you're purposely not putting in, and you have a rule about not depicting characters smoking tobacco products. Well, you're wrong, sir, and you should put those products in those things. It's almost akin to saying, well, you know what, Amazing Spider-Man 2 was such a piss-poor movie. It could have been so much better had they not had this non-depiction of tobacco products being smoked. We should have stopped for 5 minutes and just had a nice chat between Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker over a pack of Marlboros. That would have made the film so much better. It seems to be absolutely absurd to me that people would make these illusions, that people would get so bent out of shape over tobacco products being taken out of films by a studio. I can understand, as someone else pointed out, the MPAA enforcing rules and limitations on those kinds of things, the censorship mechanism. I can understand people getting upset from that point of view. I don't know how much influence the MPAA would have had in this kind of decision making. As far as I could tell, it was something passed down by Disney for their own products. If it's somebody going in and forcibly telling studios, this shouldn't be this way anymore, you can't do this anymore, I don't know that that's a good choice. We saw with the Comics Code how comic books really suffered in sort of the Silver Age, getting very goofy and all that kind of stuff with the censorship mechanism of the Comics Code. And even going back to, the McCarthy era and people being brought in for communism and all this kind of stuff. I can see people getting upset from that sort of impetus, from that sort of framework. But that's not what's going on here at all. I don't understand the need and the necessity for this to be depicted in films and for people to get so bent out of shape. Nobody's telling you you can't go down to your local Stop and Shop and buy your pack of Lucky Strike. Nobody's forcing you to quit smoking. Nobody's telling you you're wrong for doing so and all that kind of stuff. Where do you lose anything? Where does it disservice the characters or story in any way, shape, or form if Disney decides not to promote smoking? I don't see that it does, and I don't see that there's any reason to react so harshly to that. You know what? That's just my take on it. Of course, feel free to let me know in the comments what you think, whether you're a smoker or not, whether you've lost somebody to smoking or not, and whether you support or disdain ideas like this, that studios should have the freedom to choose what they depict and what they don't and how they do so. I'd be very curious to hear what people's take is on this topic. And so yeah, otherwise it's pretty much all I have to say on it. I had to, say something about it because it really baffled me that people would be so gut reactionary to this and so upset and, pissed off. And I just feel like it's a lot of wasted energy for something that is so bad to the human, condition to begin with. It's a waste of time and a waste of breath. And couldn't you be putting your anger and your frustration towards something more productive, like the GOP letter to Iran or something? So yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this, and I'll catch you later. Peace.